Hello, Grace Church. My name is Ray. You may already know me. I've been coming here for the past couple months. And today I'm taking the decision to step out on faith and tell you guys my testimony. So, I was born and raised in Puerto Rico. My family was always in the church. I grew up in the church. Although I knew God was real, I had not really experienced Him until I was about 17, where I had an experience with God where I felt a calling towards music. So I started pursuing it with no prior experience whatsoever. I got in my head and started using this calling for myself, and it began to affect my relationship with God. Fast forward a year later, Hurricane Maria came to the island, and I felt like I was out of options and it was time for me to leave. So, like a lot of Puerto Ricans at that time, I left to Chicago and I was there for a couple months. And then God opened some doors, and I finally made my way to Orlando to study music production. At this point, my relationship with God began to sour, and I was not in the best environment, and I struggled to find a church, so that didn't help as well. Sin quickly became a lifestyle I normalized. I started to smoke, have meaningless sex, and I cared a lot about what people thought about me. I graduated in September 2020, and that year in 2021, at the beginning, I moved down to Miami. And here, all those things I did in college just magnified. I was always around drugs, women, you name it. Whatever you want, really, Miami has to offer. In the meantime, I always try to seek a balance between God and the outside. So all this time, I'm going to clubs late night on Saturdays and waking up early on Sundays to go to church. From experience, if you're stuck in this place, just know that there is no balance. You will always desire to do what is against God's will. And in Miami, I went to about 8 churches, more or less, until I finally found grace. And in here, I heard a word be used in a convicting way I hadn't heard since I left Puerto Rico: sin. I kept visiting, and I learned of my nature and felt ashamed of everything I was so proud to do before. Around December, my understanding of the gospel and God began to change, so I began to change. I understood how I couldn't rely on my own strength to turn from my sinful lifestyle and the necessity of Jesus and His death for our own sins. Since then, I've surrendered friendships, relationships, my careers, my desires, and it has not been easy, but I want to glorify God with whatever I do. Romans 6:17-18. But thanks be to God, though you used to be slaves to sin, you have now come to obey from your heart the pattern of teaching that has now claimed your allegiance. You have now been set free from sin and have become slaves to righteousness.